Hello guys, welcome back to a brand new video, and today I'm going to be covering my 2024 Senate election prediction. If you don't know how Senate elections work, there are 100 Senate seats total. However, they are divided into 3 Senate classes. So each election year, whether that be a midterm or a presidential election year, only about 33 to 34 seats are actually up for election. In this Senate class, there are 34 seats for election, and different Senate classes have an advantage for different parties, just depending on which seats they hold. And in this Senate class, Republicans have a large advantage. That can be seen in 2018, because if you look at 2018 and the generic ballot, this was the midterm right after Donald Trump got elected. It was a blue wave year. Democrats were up by 8.6% in the generic ballot. However, in the Senate elections, they actually ended up losing Senate seats. Republicans gained during a blue wave simply because of how advantageous this Senate class is to Republicans. And now, if you look at 2024, it is basically neck and neck. It is a very neutral year. So that might make you think, if Democrats are 8 points behind where they were in 2018 and they lost a couple seats in 2018, what's going to happen in 2024? Well, I'm going to be covering that today. So this is the map of all the Senate seats that are up for election. If they're in light gray, they're up for election. In Nebraska, there are 2 because Ben Sasse resigned to be president of a university. So first, I'm going to mark every single Senate seat that I think will go to Democrats by more than 15%, or by a safe margin. California, Washington, Hawaii, Delaware, New Jersey. New Jersey was an odd one. I thought it was going to be under 15 or even 10 because it seemed like its senator, Bob Menendez, was going to win his party's nomination. And he has a lot of corruption scandals. However, he ended up getting into even more legal troubles recently, and that ended up basically making him lose his primary. And his replacement, Andy Kim, is actually a really good candidate, so it's definitely going to be by more than 15. New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Vermont, and Maine have independent senators. However, they caucus with the Democrats. In Vermont's case, it is further to the left than the Democratic Party. So I'm just going to count them as Democrats here. Bernie Sanders and Angus King are going to win re-election by crazy margins. And then there's 2 more that I want to talk about. There's Maryland, which has Larry Hogan, the state's former governor, running for election in the Senate. He is a Republican, and Maryland is a very Democratic state. It is like D plus 30. And he was an extremely popular governor, one of the most popular governors in the country. However, federal elections just are way more partisan than in governor elections. You can see that in Florida, where Ron DeSantis won by 19 points, where only 2 years before that, Donald Trump won the state by only like 3%. Or you can see that in Massachusetts, where Bill Wald was an extremely popular Republican governor. But when he ran for Senate, he lost to John Kerry. I think that will hold, especially in a more polarized time like the one we're living in now. And I think Larry Hogan will lose by more than 15%. And the final safe Democratic state is, weirdly enough, Minnesota. You don't normally think of Minnesota as a safe Democratic state. It is pretty blue, but not by over 15%. However, Amy Klobuchar is a special case. She is extremely popular in the state, and she wins re-election consistently by more than 15%. In 2018, she won it by 24. In 2012, she won it by 34, which is crazy. And then in 2006, she won it by 20. She is extremely popular. And even with this being a presidential election year, very similarly to 2012, with it being like a net neutral year, I think she's going to win by more than 15%, like what she did in 2012. And now for the Republican safe states, there's Utah, Wyoming. Mitt Romney's retiring in Utah, North Dakota, Nebraska special, Mississippi, Tennessee, Indiana, and funny enough, we already have a flip, and that is the state of West Virginia. Currently, Joe Manchin has one of the state's 2 Senate seats. He is an independent, but he, used to be a Democrat for many years, and he is retiring. As well, the Republican candidate is Jim Justice, one of the most popular Republican governors in the entire country. So, yeah, it's going to flip. And it's going to be like R plus 40, R plus 50, something like that. And that is it for the safe Republican states. Now for the likely Democratic states. So the states that I think will go to Democrats by between 5 and 15%. First, Pennsylvania. Bob Casey Jr. is an extremely popular incumbent, very similar to Amy Klobuchar in Minnesota. And I think he can make the seat like D plus 13, D plus 14. Next, in New Mexico, it is like a D plus 7 to D plus 10 state, and I think that will be very similar in the Senate. I think it'll be like D plus 8, something like that. In Virginia, very similar, D plus 7 to D plus 10 kind of state, and I think it will be very similar to the presidential margin, where it'll be like D plus 7. And the final Democratic likely state is the state of Arizona. This is odd, because I have it going red in the presidential election. However, this is a very special case. The Arizona GOP has decided to nominate, quite possibly, the worst person they possibly could have. Kari Lake is the Republican nominee. She lost the governor's race in an upset in 2022 to someone who didn't even campaign. Instead of taking that loss, she decided to claim election fraud. And Arizona is an extremely moderate state. It is the state of John McCain. It is the state of independence. And it does not want her. Her only saving grace could have been the current state's incumbent senator, Kyrsten Sinema, running as an independent. However, she has decided to drop out. So yeah, I believe Ruben Gallego, the Democratic nominee, will win the state by like more than 5, by like 6-ish. It could be barely under 5, but around that. That is it for the Democratic likely states. Now for the Republican likely states. Right under 15%, I have the state of Missouri. Josh Hawley is more far right than your average senator. He originally got elected in 2018 by around 5%. However, he was unseating a Democrat incumbent. However, Missouri is around an R plus 15, R plus 16 state. So what makes me think that it will be barely under 15? Well, there's two things. First of all, it's his opponent, Lucas Kunce, who is extremely popular in the state. He is a fabulous candidate, and I think he will do quite well in terms of Missouri, which is a Republican state. But I think he can get it to under 15, and you can see that in all the polls. There's not one poll here that shows Hawley being over 15%. I think it will be R plus 14, maybe R plus 13. So, yeah, I think it will be R plus 14, maybe R plus 13, because of the polls and because of his opponent, Lucas Kunce. Next, I have the state of Florida. Now, Florida's current senator is Rick Scott. He defeated a Democrat incumbent in 2018 by an extremely narrow margin, less than 1%. I think it was like 0.13%. However, Florida is shifting to the right extremely fast. Also, he is an incumbent. What you need to learn right now is incumbency is so unbelievably key in Senate and House races. It can decide whether you win or lose. It gives you a huge boost. And Rick Scott, he's the incumbent. And Florida shifting to the right. I think it'll be like R plus 7, R plus 8. And yeah, that is it for the Republican likely states. And you can already see how Republicans have such a huge advantage, because they are already at 49 seats. That is crazy. They are 1 seat away from having a tied Senate and having a majority if Donald Trump becomes president, which is what I am currently predicting. Now to the Democrat lean states. So the states between 5% and 1%. My first one is the state of Wisconsin. The current incumbent is Tammy Baldwin. She is a progressive, and she wins re-election by around 5%. Normally, I think it'll be barely under 5 because it is a presidential election year, so more Republicans will turn out for Donald Trump. However, I still think she can pull it out. She is an incumbent senator, which, like I said, I'm going to start sounding like a broken record here. Being an incumbent is so important, and that can carry her home. Also, she's quite popular. Next, I have the state of Michigan. Michigan is a slightly blue swing state, kind of like how North Carolina is a slightly red swing state. And although it does not have an incumbent currently, I still think Democrats can do quite well. I think it will be won by like 2%, and that puts Democrats at 47 seats. However, we are not done with Democratic lean states. There's one more, and that is the state of Nevada. I actually predict that Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania will all go to Donald Trump. So why do I have these Democrats winning by so much? And like I said, that's largely just because of incumbency. And I think that will carry Jackie Rosen home here. Nevada voted for Catherine Cortez Masto for the Senate in 2022. Sure, it was by less than 1%, but I believe this national environment will actually be better for Democrats than in 2022. So I think it'll be very similar to 2022, except it will be slightly more, like D plus 1.5 for Jackie Rosen. And now for the sole Republican lean state, and that is the state of Texas. Ted Cruz won Texas by around 2.5% in 2018. It was an extremely close, contentious race, and it was the first race to largely show a lot of people that Texas is truly becoming a swing state. He was going against Beto O'Rourke. I cannot say his name. Beto O'Rourke or whatever. He was a great candidate then. Not anymore. Thankfully, the Democrats did not nominate him. They actually nominated someone pretty good. However, Ted Cruz is still an incumbent Republican senator in Texas, which is like an R+5 state with extremely good name recognition in a presidential election year. I think it is certainly possible that Colin Allred, the Democratic nominee, can bring it to under 3%, which is my current prediction. I think it's possible he can even win the state. However, I just do not think that is likely. This is still the state of Texas, even if Ted Cruz is extremely unpopular. This is an incumbent senator in a R+5 state. However, do not sleep on it. It seriously could flip. I just do not think that is the most likely way that Texas could vote. So, R+3. And now we will be getting into the two states that could actually decide the Senate. Although I should say, if Donald Trump becomes president, Republicans already have the Senate. They only need 50 seats. So in order for Democrats to stop the Republicans from having the Senate, if Joe Biden loses, which it looks like he's going to, they need to flip Texas, which is extremely hard. So I'm going to cover the two states that I think will be under 1%. I'm going to start with the state of Ohio. Now, the current Democratic incumbent, Sherrod Brown, is extremely popular. He is a progressive, and he's been in office for quite a while. I think he can win re-election. All you have to do is look at the polls. Now, I know you're going to say, oh, Sammy, I thought you said you don't trust the polls in your last video. Well, that's true when Donald Trump is on the ballot. And while I do think these polls are definitely overestimating Sherrod Brown, I think it still holds some merit that Moreno, the Republican nominee, has not even won a single poll against Sherrod Brown. Sherrod Brown is just sweeping him. And I think that holds something. I do not think he's going to win by 11 or by 5 or even by 3. But I do still think he can barely hold on by a bit less than 1%. Now, if he tries to run for re-election again in like 2030, no, he's toast. Because Ohio is moving to the right extremely fast. I think it's going to vote for Donald Trump by around 9%. And that is also largely what these two states are. The main battle in Ohio and Montana is the battle between incumbency and polarization. Both of these states have voted for Donald Trump by large margins. Ohio voted for Trump by around 8%, Montana for Trump by around 16%. However, they have incumbent Democratic senators who are extremely well liked. The key difference here is that Ohio is only R+8. That is less of a gap that split-ticket voters have to bridge, because there are less and less of them every election cycle as the nation becomes more and more polarized, which is why I think Sherrod Brown wins re-election, but Jon Tester does not. It's the exact same reason. It is polarization versus incumbency. And while I think Joe Biden can keep Ohio to under 10%, I do not think he can do the same in Montana. I think he can maybe get it to below 15%, but that is it. The amount of split-ticket voters that have to bridge that gap between Biden and Tester, 15% for that to work, I just cannot see that happening. While only like 10% being needed for Sherrod Brown, that is way more possible. I think if Joe Biden can make Ohio only go to Trump by less than 10%, then I'd say Sherrod Brown wins. But if Joe Biden just loses control in Ohio and Trump wins by like 11, 12%, I'd say, yeah, Sherrod Brown is done and Republicans won 52 seats. But I think it's only going to be a slight improvement for Trump from 2020 in Ohio. The state is shifting to the right. Donald Trump is more favored this year than in 2020. But I think Joe Biden can still hold it to under 10%, and I think Sherrod Brown can win re-election. But I cannot say the same for Jon Tester. So that is my final Senate map. 51 Senate seats for Republicans to 49 for Democrats. The Senate would be decided by these three closest states, Montana, Ohio, and Texas. If Donald Trump becomes president, it does not matter. It does not matter if Democrats win Montana or not. Because if it's a 50-50 Senate and Donald Trump is president with a Republican vice president, which obviously he'd have a Republican vice president, they could break the tie and there would be a Republican Senate. In order for Democrats to win the Senate with Donald Trump winning as president, they would also have to flip Texas, which I just cannot see happening that often. Maybe I'll give it like a 25% chance, but that's it. So overall, this is my map. I predict Republicans will win the Senate, and I predict Republicans will win the Senate, and I don't even think winning Montana could help the Democrats, because I predict that Donald Trump will become president. So that's the end of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tomorrow, I will be coming out with my Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump presidential prediction. Thank you guys, and see ya.